through a whole hour of Tracy Neff straight. So we're going to do a little bit of a popcorn type presentation and go back and forth. I don't care who's speaking, an hour's got you kind of butt getting sore and that type of thing. But anyway, increasing land productivity again through using as much sun as possible. We're going to be talking about the winter annuals this time. And we showed this graph earlier. Winter annuals were really grown at here where nothing else is growing. So essentially when things are above 50, winter annuals are okay. They get really happy when the temperature goes 65 to 75. They're in kind of their prime. They're growing rapidly at that period of time. So that's what we're focusing on. Again, we're trying to fill this calendar in as much as possible.
And on these heavy soils, if you go back just for a second, a lot of times on these heavy soils, I know what they're like here in the spring. You can't get on to do seeding a lot of times. Here we're talking about a crop we establish in the fall, when a lot of times after summer we can get on these, but they're going to be growing through that real wet time in the spring when actually we don't have to get on the soils to seed anything at that time because we put it on in the fall.
And they're pulling the water out of your wet soil, which is good. So
this is, as I was talking about sorghum Sudan, just to give you an idea, this is where it's showing triticale was no-tilled into a sorghum Sudan stand after they were finished harvesting with that in the late summer, early fall. They went basically and no-tilled right into it, and as long as there's not a lot of other weeds in there, if you grow a good thick crop of sorghum Sudan, say your next rotation is going to be going into winter grain, you probably let it go through September. You'll get a little lower yield because it's getting cooler and the days are shorter. So that last cut, you cut it real low. There's not a lot of weeds. You can no-till triticale right into it or any other winter grain.
And we can get some frost. If you get frost on this, and you might get enough to take a fall harvest. If you do get frost on the crop, we suggest, assuming there's enough out there to harvest right away because what's going on with this thing? This plant, after frost, it breaks the cells, and if you get rains, it's leaching out all your nutrients. So you want to get her harvested pretty early. If there's not enough to harvest, you got a beautiful cover crop for your winter annual in case you get the real nasty winter, which we're not having this year, where things are blowing and freeze drying and hurting your crop. And the other thing that's nice about doing this is every year's different. If you have that warm, drier fall, the sorghum will give you a crop. If you have the cooler, wet year, the winter annual will give you the crop.
This is a slide just showing some of the cool season annual choices. We have the grains there. Typically, we know wheat and rye and barley that we're all familiar with. Of course, triticale is a cross between wheat and rye. And I'll say this: if you haven't done anything with triticales, and you heard 20 years ago when the new triticales are totally different than the old stuff that was out years ago.
And a little comment on spelt. If your fields do lay on a little bit on the wet side, spelt is your latest one to mature. Okay, typically we harvest spelt for forage about the same time people were doing alfalfa. It's not even close to flag leaf stage at that point, but you're getting warm, and when you get warm with the cool season annual, you're built lignans, and you don't want that. So we just take it about that time. It's time to move on anyway.
The other one is, we're going to talk a little bit about, we didn't mention yet, the annual Italian ryegrasses, oats, and then...
Yeah, I want to comment on the annual Italian ryegrasses for this area. You have a lot of the red soils, okay? The key to productivity on these red soils is building the organic matter up in them. And these are the best crops to build your soil organic matter up.
And last, you can do combinations of these. There's no reason you can't take triticale and add an annual ryegrass to it, or wheat and add a ryegrass to it, or oats and add it to triticale, or maybe if you plant early in the fall, maybe get a little bit of a fall harvest on the oats and the triticale carry over. So there's lots of combinations. You just don't have to do these as a standalone straight crop.
And there are differences between them. For example, here's our typical cereal rye that most people are used to growing. It's more of an upright plant, whereas the 815 in particular that we sell with triticale is more of a prostrate, goes along the soil and then kind of bends up. So that gives us good cover for a soil erosion perspective.
One thing's here to point out, notice the field on the right-hand side? That's going to be corn. It's going to be corn. This is early spring. Corn's not even planted yet, and look at the crop that's out there. That's triticale that's ready to harvest. So we get productivity at cooler temperatures.
Now this is a Lancaster County yield data. I don't think we're going to do that here, okay? But it kind of puts things into perspective. This is very good soils. Actually, this farmer is a dealer for us, and he's been doing aggressive crop rotation and having something growing all the time, like what we're talking about today. And his soil organic matters are now 4.5 to 5. Okay, that's one of the reasons why the yield's so big. So if we keep on working on this, our yields will go up over time as we build the soil. Now, this is Triticale Plus, which is triticale and annual ryegrasses mixed together. 2 cuts are doing about 6 tons in Lancaster. I don't know, Tracy, what we can get out here, but I don't think it's going to be 6. It might be 4 to 5.
Could get some
like
6,
that.
depends some areas, yes, depending on the soil types.
What sort of dates were
You do the first cut when you're doing typical rye cuts, so April 20-something, and the second cut is usually about 3 weeks later. Your first cut, it will be more triticale and less ryegrass, and then the second cut will be more ryegrass and less triticale. And you might see a couple stray heads out there. Don't worry about it. There's just a few out there. I'll say that's effective fiber for the program, but they don't really make up much yield. It's cosmetic.
And an advantage to that is in a wet year, you're pulling a good bit of moisture out of some of these really heavy soils that don't dry out well.
And you're building organic matter at the same time for when they go like concrete, they don't go as concrete as fast because you got the organic matter there. In the summer, we can follow with any of these sorghum programs. In this case, he uses sorghum Sudan, and he does a 2-cut system. He could choose to do a 3rd cut, but he chooses to go to oats because the sorghum Sudan's starting to thin out at that point. So anyway, I used to think we could maybe get 12 tons of dry matter. He actually measured every single, they were large square bales. I think it was about a 7, 8 acre field that he measured every single bale on the field. We did moisture tests and all that stuff. So these yields are extremely accurate. So that's not a plot, this is not plot data. This is field data.
I also think for this area, even if you dropped a 1/2 ton of dry matter off all those, so you're 14, 13, 12, you're down to like 10 to 11 tons of dry matter, I think that is very, very possible with these soils here.
I think so too. Okay, this is just a shot of the Triticale Plus. The finer stems, leaves are the ryegrass. These coarser ones are the Triticale.
This is some of the research work that we do. Tim, right there, the bigger, taller plants, that is triticale. All the other plots around it are wheat. So triticales are maturity-wise very similar to wheat, but certainly out-yield wheat, especially for forages.
Okay, and some data from Virginia Tech, Orange County. Has anybody ever been to Orange County, Virginia? It's not the best soils in the world. Okay, they're reasonable, but they're not really productive soil. This is data. They've been doing this type of research for a long time, which hardly anybody does. We're starting to get Penn State to do it. But anyway, the boot stage harvest, quite frankly, we like to see it done a little sooner. We prefer flag leaf. Almost 4.5 tons of dry matter with the 815. That's our variety. Then you go to an early rye. You can see the dates here. Early April, this stuff's harvested. So it's being, didn't get a chance to use as much sunlight. So obviously the yields are going to be lower. 2.4. And then a late rye, 3.5. This is late April, like April 20 something. And then the Tri-Cal 815s, late April, early May in Virginia. Here we're probably going to be about May 4th to the 6th, somewhere in that ballpark.
And that's over 5-year average.
Yeah, that's not a 1 year big, hey, we had a great year type thing. Then if you look at soft dough, I mentioned in my opening talk about soft dough. I don't know if we want to intentionally grow soft dough, but everybody realizes there are times, certain years, that when your crop's ready to go, it's not ready to harvest because it's muddy, it's wet, we can't get it dry, it's just bad conditions. So if, for example, we do run into one of those 1 week periods when we're trying to make it, and it goes into full head, consider a backup plan of soft dough harvest for dry cows, heifers, brood cows. Now these yields, my brother did this in Tennessee actually the 1 year because of the setup that I just talked about. Some of it got done in time, some he made it soft dough. And he was amazed at the yields, and quite frankly, this tells the same story. 9 tons of dry matter at soft dough. I'm pretty sure that's more than most of your corn silages in this area. That would be equal to, 27 tons of corn silage. Now, this is a fairly strawy, it's kind of like green straw material.
It's not as good as soft dough barley.
Because you have more strawy fiber in it.
Yeah.
But it makes beautiful dry cow, heifer, and brood cow type material. Compare that to the rye's, 5 to 6. So we got about 50% more. And that's what we tend to find is Triticale has about a 50% yield advantage over most rye, wheats, barley, in that ballpark.
50%. I like to say 50% over rye, and at least another
25.
Third to wheat.
Okay. And it does depend on the wheat. You got the short wheats and you got the tall wheats. Probably the tall wheats, it's more like 10% or so.
Right. There are some forage wheats out there. But it's a high quality, small grain forage. When we want to harvest this, Tim talked about, they did boot stage. We like it a little earlier to maximize yield quality. It's called stage 9. And that's when the flag leaf is the last leaf that's out. Flag leaf is also that leaf on wheat that we want when we want to be spraying a fungicide on our wheat crop. Triticale, the last leaf out, is also a flag leaf. When that's a stage 9, that flag leaf is fully out. The head is going to generally be about 3 to 4 inches below the top of that stem. Now, the reason I got my dollar bill out,
I accused did you guys watch him? I wasn't watching, but when he talks about 6 inches, it usually goes about that. He's a fisherman.
I fish a lot. So now you know why. Dollar bill 6 inches, anyway, that's my little tool, sorry. So stage 9, the head's going to generally be about 3 to 4 inches down there. You'll often see the stem has that swelled section in it. Sometimes split it open, you see the head right in there.
And we got pretty good energy levels at this stage of harvest. I'll talk a little bit about the annual and Italian ryegrass. This is kind of my favorite talk. Tracy gets more excited about the Triticale. I get more excited about the ryegrass. Actually, I like the combination the best. Yeah, it is a pretty neat crop. In this part of the world, we talk about seeding in the fall for a spring harvest, and we basically seed between barley and mid-wheat dates. If we have a small grain mixed with it, I feel more comfortable in the mid-wheat range than if it's straight, okay? Small grains, we can actually go to pretty much through the entire official recommended dates for the small grains of wheat, but you know, everybody stretches them out, so I get pretty nervous when we go past the official dates by putting annual and Italian ryegrass out. This is a grass, not a grain. Grains we tend to plant inch and a half type thing. Small seed like we're seeding the lawn, we're talking about a 1/4 inch. When we go into our Triticale Plus mixture, I don't have any problems with putting annual ryegrass 1/2 inch. I do got problems putting annual ryegrass 3/4 inch. So when we do our mixtures, we do a 1/2 inch, gives us our best compromise. If you go 1/4 inch in your small grains, you run the risk of winter heaving of the crop. Does require high fertility. Now, I will also say that the other small grains require high fertility as well. Most people under-fertilize Triticale.
A good fertility rate that I like to recommend on Triticale straight or even the Triticale Plus would be somewhere between 75 and 90 units of nitrogen total.
Soil's not releasing the organic matter nitrogen in the spring for these winter annuals. Matter of fact, I just had a good discussion with a guy in Maryland yesterday, and he said, I used to get proteins pretty good. Now I can't get it. Well, it goes back to nutrient management rules in Maryland. He's being told I can't put more than this down, and you know, whatever the number was. Well, I said that's the problem. So we got such a big yield out there. I don't think that the regulators or whoever's doing the plans are quite pumping it up high enough. At the same time, this guy got massive amount of manure, but it's not being released. And then they're giving him permission to put someone in a summer annual. I said, well, let's see if we can work the system a little bit and not put it on the summer annual and put more on the winter annual, because the summer annual, it's all getting released by the soil, and we actually run into nitrate problems with farms like this guy where they put a lot of manure because the soil is just kicking stuff out. So basically, our winter annuals do require a fair amount of nitrogen in late winter to early spring. So getting back to the ryegrass on harvest management, machine cut or grazing. Machine cut I'll talk about first. Notice this window here, 12 inches to 20 inches. Most people say, 12 inches isn't big enough. Well, I would say maybe it's a little short, but I'm trying to get you guys out there early. When it's 75 degrees, this stuff's growing 3 inches a day. It soon turns into 25, 30 inches. So the idea is 12 inches, get your act together and get it done by 20 is kind of what I'm telling people. It is a very dense crop. Leave 4 inches of stubble. And we like to talk about a multiple cut system with these crops. And if you do a multiple cut system, it's typically ready in about 3 weeks. 50 units after each cut. And when we're grazing, 8 to 12 inches is your goal. And one thing, if we're planting early, like in August, we don't want it 10, 12, 15 inches tall going in the winter. It will die. It will suffocate itself in snow molds and stuff like that. We want it 4 to 6 inches. So if you plant it early, that means you need to top it, cut it, graze it, but don't graze it too short. Challenge is when does winter come? Nobody ever knows. So that's our goal, 4 to 6 inches. Back to spring. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, they missed it. This is too tall. It's starting to lodge, it's starting to go down. Also, it's maturing, so you expect the quality levels are going to be falling. Quite often in our Triticale Plus mix of guys that harvest it and I only got 12 or 13% protein out of this. You know, I was looking for something more like 16. Well, when did you mow it? Well, you know, the ryegrass, the heads were starting to come out.
Well, in this field, the heads are not even coming out yet, but this is actually a personal friend of mine, and you know, they were following the small grain model. Right. The small grain model is not really appropriate for ryegrass.
Question.
Yes.
Could you cut that field in the fall and still have a good yield in the spring?
Usually, if okay, the question was can we harvest in the fall, not harm the crop, and then harvest next spring? Normally, yes. Occasionally, you will get burned by the timing of the harvest and when winter comes. So if you're cutting kind of short and it regrows to maybe a little bit and it didn't get a chance to fill its carbohydrates back up, you can weaken the plant. So that's kind of, it doesn't usually happen. John, do you have any other comments? Do you get many reports on that, Barrenbrook? People harvest fall, or is it out of your area?
Well, it depends on the growing season, when you put it in the ground, as you pointed out. So typically, you should be able to get out the top. When in doubt, I would actually recommend taking it gun because if it gets too cold into the winter, you can see some serious winter damage.
That's the biggest problem. You know, so it usually works. One thing we don't want to do is we don't want to put nitrogen on late fall or in the middle of the winter, or manure in the middle of the winter. It wakes it back up, and then the cold weather comes and it gets harmed. Just some research plots, which you really can't see, so we'll skip over that.
Again, just to review, as Tim said, this is a dense crop. It's thick. And even if you're looking at the 12, 14 inches, there's going to be more forage out there than what you think there is because it's dense.
This is the perfect stage, 16 inches or so. That's when I love to see it harvested.
Just to show you some pictures, this is a trial that was done at Penn State Landisville a few years ago. We're just going to breeze through this. What we want to show is the pictures because we have some wheat and some annual ryegrass and some Italians in here. It shows the difference in height and regrowth after cutting.
Now, we talked them into doing this trial in 2004. I talked them into doing another trial this year, but except it's up at State College because we wanted to prove that we can really take this stuff further north and it does have good winter hardiness. Maybe not a great year to test winter hardiness. On April 29th, rye is already past its prime. Nothing against rye. It just should have been harvested sooner. And you really can't see this that well. Over here is another small grain, and there's ryegrass in between.
Here you can see there's wheat on the left, Marshall annual ryegrass next to it.
These are all Italians.
Italians, there's Zorro's one that we don't sell anymore. But you can see, actually at this stage, the annual looks like it's has a little more advantage over the Italians.
It does.
This is April 29th.
2 weeks afterwards, not harvested, but I just wanted to show you the regrowth. The weight, small grains, you can see the small grain, basically no regrowth. Marshall's regrowing, Zorro's regrowing, but just call it Italian versus annual. This is when they harvested. 3 weeks later, I will grant that this was a pretty good year. Again, just stragglers of wheat. Marshall's doing okay. The Italians are actually doing better. This one here is actually a Barrenbrook experimental that never made it to production. I'll complain to John. Borelli, it really impressed me. It was a beautiful product. Anyway, the Italians are actually stronger the second cut.
This was 6-8. Again, you see the wheat, it's nothing there. The Marshall is, but again, the Italians are showing a little better regrowth. And this was a good year because we had good moisture in through early June. And the Italians are really showing their strength.
Now, In this part of the world, we would usually say 2 cuts and move on.
Right.
Any questions or comments?
It's tough to get 2 cuttings a lot of ryegrass in the spring here.
It is? Okay.
Because most of the time we can't get in the field till the middle of May.
Too wet. Okay. Now,
I mean, I don't know.
I will say that I would encourage maybe just take one, do the triticale and the ryegrass combined, and do it a little, well, in the beginning, do it at that flag leaf, or maybe a tad earlier. And let your soil organic matters be built up. And after about 3, 4, 5 years, your soils will start to change by having the ryegrass in it. That would be a way to help get around that.
Well, I've planted for the past 3 or 4 years.
Okay. Are you
and-
starting to see any?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I'm seeing yield differences in corn and so because
All right, I'm going to repeat that for the tape. Comment was after 3 years or 4 years?
this would be the 4th.
So 3 years after about 3 years, the following crops are starting to do better, and I'm going to attribute that to better soil organic matter. Those roots in the winter are active, even with a harsh winter, are actively growing. Typically, by the time you harvest it, roots are 6 foot deep. The top's only this big, but the roots are 6 foot deep. Pretty impressive stuff. Any more questions? Yes.
Do you have any guys doing oats and triticale? Maybe what they call double play, some guys call double play.
Well-
And if you do, what for seeding rates?
Okay.
The question was, do we have anyone mixing oats and the triticale or triticale plus together?
Yes. Now, your first comment was oats and ryegrass. I'll take that one first. That we call it oats plus. I like that mix. You get good fall growth, and then the ryegrass is essentially by itself with a little oat regrowth. Good mix. If you want more fall growth, that's the one to go with. We have this mix called double play, which is triticale, oats, and ryegrass. That is what I call a compromise mix. It's really not super in the fall or super in the spring. It's okay in the fall and okay in the spring. It gives you some of each. I personally prefer to see, the oats followed by the triticale, or the triticale and the ryegrass. I think you get better production out of it. Would you?
Those
comment?
crops were designed with the oats in for those periods of time when you are short on feed and you really need something to take as much as you can get of anything in the fall. So mixing oats and ryegrass or oats with the triticale plus, you'll get a small cutting of oats in the fall. But by planting once, you'll get the triticale or the ryegrass